Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic podcast. Today I'm joined by Matt Dabrowski, creator of Streets of Rogue, a roguelike game that has earned such praises from PC Gamer as it gives you more freedom than any roguelike, and its varied cast of characters combined with the randomness of traits and mutators mean no two runs play out the same way. And from Nintendo Life, as RPGs are the best when they give you a world where you can be anyone and do anything. And honestly, I can't help but agree with both of these statements, as the sheer amount of things you can do in this game easily give you hours of enjoyment that seemingly get both wilder and more amusing as you progress. So, Matt, thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah, no problem whatsoever there. So, why don't you, to get started, why don't you tell us about tell us about yourself, so give people some information.
Oh yeah, so my name is Matt Dabrowski. I'm a video game developer as the main thing that I do on a day-to-day basis. Probably most notable for making this game called Streets of Rogue, which is out now on the PC, the Xbox, the PlayStation, Nintendo. Um, yeah, so that's what I do all day. What else do I do? I guess I'm a father, a husband. I don't really have any other hobbies aside from video games at the moment because I don't have any time to do anything.
Mhm.
So yeah, what else? I don't know. What else could I talk about? My early life. I don't know. Anything you'd like to know in particular?
Well, anything you're really wanting to share, but if you're kind of unsure of what to talk about, I have a lot of, or not a lot, I have a handful of questions I'd be more than happy to ask.
Oh yeah, right. Sure, go for it.
So I'm assuming since you got into game development, and it's a lot of game developers do, is you would have probably played games as a child. What was your favorite game as a child?
So as a kid, I pretty much played any game that I could get my hands on. I mean,
Mhm.
games weren't as readily available as they are now. I mean, now it's like whatever device you have, there's a million free things for you out there. But back then, it was more of a big deal to play something new. So I would just eat up anything I could get my hands on. I played. I think one of my favorite game as a kid. Probably was the original Doom. Actually, maybe still is my favorite game. Um, yeah, I loved first person shooters or loved first person shooters or what they're called now is boomer shooters, like
Mm.
games that came out sort of in the 90s. That era games like I guess Quake, Doom, Half Life, stuff from that 90s period. Um, but I mean, I played pretty much everything. I played platformers, strategy games, adventures. Legend of Zelda was the first game I ever owned. Um, LucasArts Sierra style adventure games. I actually made one of those. That was the first like major game that I ever made was a game in that style. Um, and then I started doing game development back when I was about 8 years old. Is when I first got
Oh
my
wow.
first piece of game development software. Yeah, so this was ages ago. This was the early '90s. And as an 8-year-old using a pretty limited piece of software from back then, there wasn't a whole lot you could do, but it's a place to start. And then as the internet became a thing, I started working with a program called ZZT, which was actually the first game that was ever put out by Epic Games. Back then, Epic Mega Games. It was just one guy. So ZZT was sort of like proto Unreal. It was like a platform for making other games. So there was a community of people making games for this thing called ZZT back then, and that's sort of where I got my start putting out games online, just for free. There's a bunch of people just doing it for fun. It's mostly teenagers. Um, so yeah, I guess that's about what I was doing as a kid, I suppose.
And that's really interesting just because I've never heard of ZZT. I think me, like many other people, are well aware of what Unreal is and the Unreal Engine, seeing as it's in a lot of places right now.
Yeah.
Um, and also, it's interesting. I never actually heard, Doom referred to as a boomer shooter. I've
Yeah,
always personally referred to them as arcade shooters, so that's a good thing to be aware of that they go by or can go by multiple different names.
yeah,
And
I
it's
hadn't heard of arcade shooter before, but yeah, boomer shooter seems to be the one that's getting a lot of traction these days. I mean, obviously the word boomer has, at first at first it referred to people born in the 50s and whatever, but
Mhm,
that word seems to be like just anybody who's like not Gen Z or whatever. I think
mhm.
um, like there's a meme out there, the 30-year-old boomer, which is like the guy who like owns a house and like likes boomer shooters like that and
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. Um, but yeah, go on. What were you saying?
Oh no, I was going to say that, and that's like a really interesting thing to know because with the current resurgent of um, you know, uh, 90s style first person shooters coming out, um, having a better idea of what the naming conventions might be will help people for searching them. Uh,
Yeah, a game like Dusk, for example.
yes.
Yeah, something like that. That's a boomer shooter.
Yeah, and like if you're like me, you otherwise just look for arcade shooter. You'll find it, but you'll find other things. But I think boomer shooter, like you said, it has some interesting connotations. But knowing that might actually help um, trying to narrow down that field for people like me that are enjoying that resurgence and are wanting to look more into it, but kind of being inundated with all the other kind of games that are coming out that are similar but not exactly that.
Yeah.
Now, just a quick comment from someone that, sounds about we're close enough in age. So, what was it like playing Doom as a young child? How did that fly for you?
I mean, it was like so. I mean, we'll give you a little bit of context. The first time I played it was actually in like I think January of 1994. I had actually gone to the store to purchase Wolfenstein 3D.
Hmm.
For some reason, my dad thought that was okay. I was like 9 years old, and so yeah, at the store. I mean, Doom wasn't actually sold in stores at the time. It was sold only online, or not online because there was no real major. There was, but it's 1994. So
Yeah.
they were selling Wolfenstein at the store, and the guy at the store was just like, "Yeah, Doom is just like Wolfenstein, just a bit bloodier." And I was like, "Oh, okay," because I mean, I couldn't really tell the major difference, but I thought it was cool at the store. I remember, but I just went home and played Wolfenstein. I didn't really, you know, the difference didn't quite register. Then some months later, my dad actually got a pirate copy of the game from work. And I played it. Having been playing Wolfenstein for months, check that out. And I mean, the difference is night and day. And to actually then I was like, oh, okay, I see what I've been missing now. Like, holy crap! Like this is like mind blowing stuff right here. And that was pretty much my go to thing on PC for quite a while. And I mean, like you just spend just hours just murdering things and blowing things up with a rocket launcher with satisfying giblet effects. I mean, there really was nothing else quite like it at the time. Um,
Mhm.
so um, so yeah, I mean, like that was a pretty big deal as a kid.
Yeah, and just, a little food for thought based on what you said. I'd like to note that I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone whose mother bought them Doom. It was always the father who did it
Oh,
with
no, no, no.
little
Yeah, yeah. I gotcha. I see what you're saying.
yeah, little to no regard for what they were letting their child play. It was, it's fine.
Yeah,
Um, for me, in fact, it was, I was about 7, got my first computer, and my father was showing me how to use DOS so I could run Doom, just Doom.
yeah.
No other game required that. So it's just something I've noticed that it's always the fathers that are like, yeah, here's Doom, here's Quake, have fun, go nuts.
Yeah, well, I think at the time people were being inundated with these news reports about Mortal Kombat and Night Trap and what have you, and I think I mean I think it was mostly targeted at moms, uh,
Hmm.
if I'm remembering right. Uh, it's scaring moms, I guess, and yeah, I mean, my mom didn't want me to have Mortal Kombat. I was like, I have Doom. Like, what do you care? Like, this is a, but it's like, I don't know. That was just the one she knew about.
Yeah,
They didn't know
exactly.
about Wolfenstein 3D. That wasn't really quite as famous. So,
And
yeah,
that's an interesting point because that kind of that tracks. That makes perfect sense. Um, so from the sounds of it, sounds like first-person shooters in general were your favorite go-to game as a kid. Now, has that kind of stretched forward into your adulthood? Like, are first-person shooters still your current favorite games, or has that shifted with age and time?
I mean, I haven't really like I never really got into sort of the modern kind of like Call of Duty style things. I mean, what the major like AAA major releases morphed into is something I wasn't really super interested in.
Mhm,
Um, I mean, like games are excuse me, games aren't like straight shooters. You know, the games like the Fallout threes, Fallout fours of the world. I just played a Far Cry game for the first time recently. I guess you'd classify that as a. I mean, it's an open. I don't know if you classify that as more of an FPS or an open world game, or why even try to label these things these days.
mhm,
But I enjoyed that a lot. I don't know. Personally, um, what do I play? I mean, it's really only fairly recently that I've kind of gotten back into actually playing stuff for more than like a few hours. If I ever bought anything, because I haven't really had a lot of time lately. So
mhm.
mostly lately, I've just been playing a lot of open world stuff as sort of research for the Streets of Rogue sequel. Um, but I don't know. I have a giant queue of games that I really need to get to, and hopefully, I get to try some more varied things eventually.
Mhm. And yeah, it's always definitely a problem when you have a what looks like an never end or an Everest of games to get through. I myself suffer from that as well, and I'm doing my best to kind of tailor that back. Um, and yeah, it's always just just one step at a time, so to say. Now, you did touch on something, and sidestepping trying to uh, label a game like Far Cry where it falls. Easiest way is you're correct, just call it open world first person and leave it at that. But yeah, like I don't think a lot of people seem to fully grasp the sheer difference in a game like I'm going to use Halo for example because Halo is one of the first ones in my memory that kind of shifted how first person shooters work, where you only get two guns, and that's kind of like in my mind that is the modern first person shooter where it limits how many weapons you get. It doesn't just sort of go, here, you're carrying a shotgun, a super shotgun, a chainsaw, a pistol, a machine gun. Like, it's you're not carrying an arsenal. You're carrying one or two things and that's it.
Yeah,
Um, and I think a lot of people don't really fully grasp that there is a major difference in that. And a lot of people, like you kind of touched on, just don't really jive with that modern shooter for whatever reason. Me personally, it took a long time for me to fully enjoy them, only because I didn't like the limitation of going, well, I want all these guns. I like the variety. I like how, what it is. And in some cases, those games, and again, not trying to speak down to these games, but like, in games like Doom or Duke Nukem or Quake, each gun typically had a purpose. It was a tool to be used as needed. Whereas, other games kind of limited the need for tools, or limited the need to have varying tools. Kind of like, well, a hammer's going to be a hammer no matter what you need it for, and everything's a nail. And again, I'm
yeah,
not speaking ill towards that, but that's something a lot of people don't seem to truly understand sometimes. And being able to have your preferences great when you have the resurgence of games that are kind of going back to black, so to say. I really hope I
yeah.
used that term right.
Yeah,
um
yeah, no, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and by the way, there's also this sort of new variety of like I would almost classify like the new Doom games, like Doom 2016 and Eternal as sort of their own thing. I mean, that's definitely. I mean, it's not like a boomer shooter, but it's
yeah.
also not like Call of Duty. And those, it's kind of. I think those games are amazing. By the way, like Doom
Mhm.
Eternal is like I played. It might be my favorite game of the year actually. Like which I wasn't really expecting. I mean, I liked Doom 2016, but Doom Eternal is just like next level stuff right there. I've never played a more mechanically dense first
Mhm.
person shooter. I don't think. It's just amazing once you really get into it.
Yes, and that's actually something I wanted to ask you about. Um, just because you said your limited time or what you've been able to play if you had played them, and yeah, so Doom 2016, I agree. It's not Doom per se. I personally feel that Doom 2016 is a masterfully done evolution of the arcade shooter. Arguably not a boomer shooter, as you now have educated me on the classification of. But like, what? I don't know if you played the Shadow Warrior, the remake of Shadow Warrior by Wild Hog. Um,
I didn't. I've always wanted to. I actually met those guys at GDC one year, and I was like, I got it in my queue, and they're like, oh, wait for Shadow Warrior 2,
mhm.
and then I didn't have time to play that either. So maybe Shadow Warrior 3. We'll see.
Yeah, and like those games were great. Don't like I'm not in any way trying to downplay them. Shadow Warrior, when I first played it, I went, "Oh wow, this is the true evolution of first person shooters, of arcade shooters." And then the new Wolfenstein game came out, and I went, "Oh wow, this just put it to shame." And then Shadow Warrior 2 came out, which is a masterfully done arcade shooter with some light looter shooter elements. But then Doom 2016 came out, and I was like, "Oh man, this is peak. Like this is the new arcade shooter standard that I don't think anything's going to ever be able to beat." And then Doom Eternal came out, and arguably, I don't feel that's an arcade shooter. As you kind of touched on, it is a technically dense game. And I agree completely. For me, it was my game of the year. It was the game I absolutely loved, but it was, I don't want to say a chore. It was a difficult thing. Had a steep learning curve, but once you get that learning curve, I don't know. You may disagree or agree, but once you get that learning curve, that game becomes it's like a running car. Everything you're doing has purpose. Everything you're doing is intended, and it's just the game flow. I guess you'd call it. I don't know if there's a more appropriate term, but the game flow for it just is beautiful. And like I said, I agree completely that Doom 2016, or not 20, Doom Eternal was my game of the year because it's just such a beautifully crafted game on every level.
Yeah. No, it's like they like it's kind of a rare thing from the AAA space, and I don't know, maybe who knows, maybe stuff like Shadow Warrior kind of paved the way a little bit for that, because like for a while, like the issue with AAA, studios like Activision, people doing these major shooters, is that they don't want to really innovate too. They don't want to rock the boat too much. They don't really try to set new trends. That they were kind of content with doing the same thing for a long time, and it's really the emergence of these kind of like double A, or like bigger indie studios like Flying Wild Hog, that have kind of been really able to innovate in this space, and so that was a rare thing when like Doom 2016 came out, to see uh, like a major studio trying something that different with this genre, and with a big established property like Doom. I mean, I know that prior to that version of Doom, they had been working on this version of Doom for a while that was more like Call of Duty, that was sort of more, along those lines of a standard, like, uh, late 2000s, early 2010s shooter. And it would have been interesting to see what that was, like military shooter kind of thing.
Mhm.
Uh, but obviously they shifted direction to something completely different partway through. Um, uh, but then, yeah, like Doom Eternal, like I guess people's reception to Doom, I guess gave them the confidence to do what they did with Doom Eternal. I wonder if like Doom 2016 had Doom Eternal's gameplay, like if like what people would have even made of that. Like it would have, I think people's minds just really would have been blown. I think they needed Doom 2016 to kind of prepare them for this sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm going to like strongly agree with you there because yeah, like that the like the landscape, if you will, of what the arcade shooter was becoming at that point. If it had went from Shadow Warrior to Wolfenstein to Doom Eternal, that would have been that would have been a very difficult pill to swallow personally, because kind of for Doom Eternal, you kind of needed Doom 2016. You needed something as that bridge gap to really feel the changes they were making. And that's not me saying that in a negative way. It's just I don't think we, as a gaming society or what have you, would have been ready for Doom Eternal had Doom 2016 not existed.
Yeah, I just don't know where they're going to take it from here because like how they can make this. It'll be interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to it, but I'm sure it'll be amazing whatever they come up with.
100%. Yeah, I like you. I'm in the boat for the ride, and I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. Now, we've talked some positive things about games, and the whole purpose of this whole podcast is to kind of talk positivity. However, has there been a game that you enjoyed as a child that you went back to as an adult and kind of went, this didn't really click for you again for whatever reason?
Hmm, that's a interesting one.
Or even a more recent game. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but thinking back to childhood can sometimes be a little difficult. So a childhood game or a recent game or something that just doesn't click today for you.
But I'd say maybe not so much a game, but like the entire like adventure game genre. Like the games like the Day of the Tentacles and the Salmon Max and those old LucasArts games.
Hmm.
I mean, well, first off, I mean having they're not really exactly super replayable because you solve the puzzles the same way each time. But I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to go back to that sort of style of game, even like other games in the genre at this point, because it just feels um, it just feels kind of like a lot of trial and error, and I don't know. I just don't really have time for that these days. I think inevitably
Hmm.
what ends up happening is I'll just end up like going for a walkthrough or something like that. If I get stuck, because I'm just like, I don't have time to like mess with this. I mean, the genre has kind of evolved in a direction where that's no longer a big. So I mean, like I guess the evolution of the genre would be like the don't nod games, the games like Life is Strange, or the
Hmm.
Walking Dead Telltale series. Um, which because really the purpose of these games is to kind of like tell a story, and without when you leave out the puzzles, when you know how to solve all the puzzles, the reason to replay these games again is just to experience the story and the dialogue and stuff again. Um, but recent games have kind of cut out all that frustration that these games used to have. So games that sort of try to stick to that old formula, I don't really have as much interest in nowadays.
And yeah, like I can understand that makes sense. Because like you said, you kind of hit a wall sometimes, and you go to the walkthrough, and like for me personally, I played a lot. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. I played a good handful of those point and click adventure games when I was younger. I unfortunately missed out on the LucasArts one. I was more Sierra's side of them.
Oh, really, I hated the Zero ones for the most part. Just couldn't get into those at all.
Well, for me, it was more that that's what my father played, and that's what he gave me to play. Um, Again, questionable things for my father to let me, a 7, 8 year old, play Leisure Suit Larry, but it was the '90s were a wild time. Um,
Yes.
but like going back to the walkthrough comment that you made, the prime example, I think it was King's Quest V. There's notorious puzzles in that, like the desert, where you could spend hours without a walkthrough because you have to know to go like north, south, east. You have to know where to do it without dying. Or the unfortunate thing of you can find a needle in a haystack, and then you can trade that needle for something else, but you're not supposed to do that, because if you do, you can then play another like 2 hours of the game and
Oh
have to
God.
restart. So
Yeah.
I get 100% where you're saying, where the climate shift is more towards gearing, or not gearing, directing you to enjoy the story with some light puzzle elements, because at the end of the day, if all you do is get frustrated with the game, with a puzzle game, the likelihood of you playing it or enjoying it is going to go down, right? So yeah, I completely agree and understand with where you're coming for that one. I do know there has been a bit of a resurgence for classic ones. Um, I just hope they're not as absurd as some of the true classics, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, there was sort of a backlash, even like, thinking back like 20 years ago on the internet. I remember there was a site called like oldmanmurray.com. I think this is where this came from, but it was like they did an article on like um like this puzzle in like one of the Gabriel Knight games, like the first 3D one, where you had to like,
Mm.
it's some ridiculous thing. You had to get like a fake mustache, and you did it by like placing a piece of double-sided tape on a cat door, and like getting the cat's whiskers, or no, getting the cat's fur, and then somehow putting that on your face or something ridiculous like that. And it's like, what is this even? Like, how does this? How, what? Like,
Yeah, there's no amount of logical steps that are going to take a person to doing that. Like it's
like
at the,
this is just like adventure games, like going like getting like a normal person who hasn't been playing adventure games would look at this and be like, what, why would this happen? Why would this ever happen? As someone playing adventure games for a long time, it's like, oh well, this is just common, I guess, at this point. But
yeah.
um yeah. And by the way, the worst example of that like getting stuck thing, you mentioned from King's Quest, there's a game called Return to Zork. Um, at the very beginning of the game, first screen of the game, there's like a plant, and if you pull the plant up, instead of literally digging it up with a knife, not cutting it, digging it up with a knife. If you do anything else, if you pull it up, if you cut it with a knife, uh, you've lost the game. You can't you can't finish the game after that. And it'll take you like 3 hours or more to figure that out. So yeah.
And yeah, that's just a weird, yeah. Like I understand what you're saying. That's just a weird way to punish people because you why would you do that? Um, yeah, that's just kind of mind-boggling. So now because you started putting out Streets of Rogue in early access in 2017. Now that would have kind of been past the beginning phases of social media. So we're in the full swing at this point of social media being a thing to allow you to interact with fans. How do you feel social media has may have impacted or um, with you for fan interaction when you're trying to release a game and develop a game?
I mean, it's been, kind of enormous. I mean, it's the way that this game was able to be made, basically, through fan interaction. Through different avenues, through everything from the message boards on Steam to the Discord, people emailing me. There's actually a forum. If you go into the game on the title screen, you can press like send something to the developer. You can write me a message. It'll go directly to my email. This is how this game was able to get made, because it's like it the game is very like systems driven.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that are interacting with other things in ways that I couldn't have anticipated. Um, just different systems at play, and uh, so that causes an enormous number of bugs. This is true of much bigger games than mine. You see it all the time when like a Bethesda game releases. People give those games a lot of crap for all the bugs that come at release, but I mean, to me, that's not surprising at all. It's just sort of comes with the territory when you're doing something that has so much going on. Um, but of course, I don't have a full QA team,
Mhm.
so I kind of depend on people's feedback in order to make the game better. And if I hadn't had that feedback, then this thing would be a complete janky mess. So um, yeah, I mean, it's been kind of essential, being able to interact with people online, for this game to be made.
And that, from the sounds of it as well, that sounds like it's been a positive, um, a positive. Wow, I'm struggling for just a positive thing in general. So that's good that you have devoted fans that are effectively encountering bugs and putting bugs forward for you to be aware of. Now, you mentioned something, and it reminded me of something. So with all the systems in play, all the potential bugs that could unintentionally come from that, have there been any bugs that came about due to how systems work that just make you go, wow? I need to make this work better. Now, and I say that in the sense of, I don't know if you're familiar with Dwarf Fortress, but a
Yeah,
couple years back, a bug came out where a bunch of cats were dying from alcohol poisoning, I believe is how it went.
I've heard this one before, but yeah, go on.
Yeah, and that one is kind of like a weird interaction of systems with emergent gameplay where it came about that people were spilling beer or ale or what have you in the tavern. Cats were rolling in it. Their fur was getting saturated. They were licking the fur too much, and then they were dying of alcohol poisoning. Now, on the surface, that's a lot of things that could be argued as a bug, but that's kind of more in reality. It's an emergent happy coincidence. Now, have you had any of those happy coincidences that you saw happen or someone reported and went, no, 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 I have to make this work more reliably in an amusing sense or just a sense of this is good?
Yeah, I mean that sort of stuff happens. Obviously, my systems aren't quite as dense as Dwarf Fortress, but I don't
Hmm.
think many games can really claim that. But yeah, things like well, like one thing that people see sometimes and they think is a bug and could have been classified as a bug is like sometimes two like gangsters of from opposing gangs will spawn in the same building, and they'll just immediately start fighting each other. And people say, well, why are they hanging out there? It's like it doesn't matter. You just wandered. I guess you just wandered across, a fight, and that's kind of cool just to just see that happening, just out of nowhere. Just you're walking around, and there's a fight that's broken out. So I kept that in. It may not make sense that they're hanging out in the same building, I guess, but whatever. It creates an entertaining situation. So yeah, I'll just leave it.
And yeah, that totally makes sense because why, what real damage does that cause? Getting to walk up on a building and, as I've sold this game to my friend as, watch someone get baseball batted through a series of walls. Like that's not a bad thing. That's it's going to be a quick thing. Rarely is it going to cause, a bunch of other NPCs to really go nuts and start fighting. It can, but not as common. And like what harm does it cause? It's you come across it, you have a good laugh. Maybe you get some items out of it that you otherwise would not have got, and then you just keep going on your way, right? So that makes perfect sense to want to leave something like that in because it's just enjoyable gameplay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, the whole thing is part of the thing I have to be aware of is what I was aware of when I was making this is like you want to give people good stories to tell about the game and
Mhm.
memorable moments, and that's how it sticks in people's mind. So as I try to one of my rules when working on this game is if I have something cool, if I have a cool idea, I'll try to put it in, and maybe it's not balanced, but like I'll figure that out later. Like like
Mhm.
the giantizer pill, for example. Like what that's something that's a constant sort of amusement for people. Like it makes your character into a giant. Um, like initially it was completely off balance because it lasted for like 30 seconds and all this other stuff, and eventually, I mean, maybe it's still not super balanced, I don't know, but you can do things to help. You can make the price of the pill higher, you can limit the amount of time people are able to do it, but I'm not just going to cut it because it can break certain things. I'll just find ways around it. It's like um, yeah, I try to leave as much entertaining as many entertaining elements in there as I can. And there's been very few times when I've just completely removed something from the game,
Mhm.
that I thought added to the entertainment value.
And yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And kind of leads into the next question that I have is, a lot of games now are seemingly taking elements from the roguelike genre, yours being a roguelike game in itself. Um, and you kind of entered that market after the roguelike, the resurgence had kind of, I don't want to say peak, but it was steadily along the way at that point, I feel, when
Yeah,
Streets of Rogue came out. Um, And obviously you took the more comedic approach to that. Like you said, you have the giantizer pill, and you know you're right. Like just making an element of the game for the enjoyment of it and worrying about the details later is, I think, something that is uniquely available to a roguelike game. Because, not a lot of other games, like you couldn't see that in something like Assassin's Creed or other games. It's something that a roguelike is where a comedic roguelike is where you're going to see that and find it acceptable. If you play like some roguelike boomer shooters, some of those elements might not be acceptable just because it's like, well, it's going to really unbalance everything and, blah, blah, blah. So what was it for the roguelike genre that really drew you to inspire you to make Streets of Rogue?
Well, I guess it's the idea that like so I mean I was enjoying roguelites. I was really into like Spelunky and Binding of Isaac
Mhm.
specifically. Um, and yeah, like you were saying, a lot of there was sort of a resurgence around this time. I started working on Streets of Rogue around like late 2013, like very late 2013. So that was when we're really starting to see this resurgence, like maybe
Mhm.
2014 ish through 2016. Um, and yeah, I mean, admittedly, like part of the reason I decided I'd like to try my hand at this genre is because they seem to be doing well at the time. Like any like I would keep track of like how well things were doing on Steam, and I mean, this is something you have to really consider before you start working on a game. Is are people actually going to want to purchase this thing? Um, and it seems like okay, well, this is a hot genre at the time, but also I didn't really I mean, a lot of these games are just sort of very, or at least in the roguelite genre, these games tend to be like very, very action oriented, and
Mhm.
I didn't really see. I mean, like the kind of thing that Streets of Rogue was doing, which was combining like an immersive sim slash RPG kind of thing with a roguelite. I just hadn't really seen it done before, and you know, I figured like, well, this is within my capabilities, like, and this is the kind of thing I would like to play. So why not try my hand at it? I mean, like if nobody else is going to do this, this seems like something that could be unique and appeal to a lot of people. It's that's another thing. Like it's the kind of thing that you might not have known that you wanted until you actually see it, and that's sort of uh, uh, you know a, like I guess a big selling point for something is something I had to consider. So yeah, I mean, like I was actually working on another game at the time, which was like a big Metroidvania style game with like really nice artwork and stuff, and I kind of just dropped that to do this, which was completely and totally different, just because like it was just more interesting to work on, and I thought it had more of a chance to actually like be something that people were interested in. Um, so what was the original question? I forgot.
The original question was kind of, what from the genre drew you to it and inspired you to make it. And I think you kind of you danced around it. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean you kind of circled around it and answered it. Um, and like, and and I like I mean no offense whatsoever when I say this. Um, but yeah, your game is really a much more back to basics for what Rogue, like it's closer to what Rogue really was. Um, obviously you have a bunch of some sim stuff, you have some action RPG elements and all that to it, but as someone that enjoys roguelikes, your game is a much more true to form version of a roguelike than something like the other action oriented ones that arguably might take some more inspiration from Demon Souls or Souls likes.
Yeah, see
Because
that.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, I was saying like even like around like I think Dark Souls, when did that come out, like 2011 or something like that. Like the genre of Souls like hadn't even really become like a thing at that point when I started working on this, or it hadn't really become entered. Well, that word definitely hadn't entered the lexicon.
Mhm.
I mean, the game had become kind of big, but like yeah, now right, yeah, now like you're saying, yeah, you're seeing a bunch of Souls likes in the roguelike genre as well. Yeah,
And yeah, and like
cool.
I think I know I can't speak too true to this, but me personally, I enjoy Streets of Rogue in a different way, more so than some of the roguelike Metroidvanias, which is kind of the side scroller equivalent of a Souls like or what have you. But like I enjoy Streets of Rogue because it feels much closer to the original vision of Rogue, like the top down, the emergent gameplay, all of that. It's relying more on things that are truly not going to be scripted in a way that you expect to happen. Like obviously, you have certain elements that do repeat in yours. For example, like the missions of for saving the gorillas from the scientists. Um, but it's not always going to be the map generates and you go, okay, I know what's going to be here, or you don't enter a room and go, I have an idea what this room is going to be. And that's one of the things I like about about Streets of Rogue, and roguelikes in general, is the sheer randomness, the sheer thing that truly gives you the ability to not experience the same run more than once. And that's a fantastic thing in my opinion, because it's a genre that has had a lot of changes made to it, and I say that in a respectful and good way. It's good to have that variety, but having a game that's closer to home, I think, is a fantastic thing. And I just want to let you say that in a roundabout way of saying I really enjoy Streets of Rogue, and it's I think it's a fantastic roguelike game at its core.
Oh well, thanks. Yeah, appreciated. Yeah, no, I mean that was sort of a big part of what I was trying to do. I really wanted to make sure that the game was like super replayable and not like repetitive, like super repetitive. And, I mean that was one of the core things that was a big advantage of the early roguelikes. I mean, like I did play a bunch of NetHack as well, like in the 2000s or so. So I mean that sort of thing was at the back of my mind when I was making this.
Hmm. Now, before we start recording, you had mentioned that you have a 10-month-old. How does having effectively a newborn, a new child, new person in your family, how has that impacted your ability to game or to develop? Hey, the juggling all of that, because it's a child, you want to spend time with your child and all of that. um I say that a little too glibly, it's unintended, but how has that kind of worked with, how has having a young child worked with developing and just gaming in general?
Fortunately, my wife has been able to take some time off from work this year. Also, because of the well pandemic, a lot of people are home, so she has been doing
Mhm.
some work, but it's mostly from home. So she's been able to, primarily take care of him during the daytime, and I'll take care of him for some parts of the day, but then at nighttime, his bedtime's around like 6 or 6:30 or so. So then I can work for the entire evening if I need to. I will say this: I try to take weekends off more. Um, yeah, like previously, like I pretty much work. I don't think I took weekends off for any of the development of Streets of Rogue, but I'm trying to ease up on that a bit, and take more time off, at least in the early stages of developing the sequel. Um, so yeah, like I'm taking today off and tomorrow off. But um, yeah, no, it hasn't affected development a ton, like for I guess the reasons I mentioned, but uh, it is tempting to want to like go out and squeeze his face or whatever uh, while I'm working. So that temptation is there.
And sometimes, I don't think it's going to be a bad thing if, to give in to that temptation because, like I personally don't have children. So I can't speak to this one, but I'm going to make an assumption and I apologize if it is a wildly off assumption. But, there are people that when they're stressed out, petting their pet helps them calm down. So I would imagine, going and just giving your son's cheeks a little squeeze, if you're stressed out or something that might help. And I don't think that's ever a bad thing to try and de-escalate your stress in positive and productive ways, right?
Yeah, no, he's a cool little guy. Yeah, no, it's always good to take a little bit off and spend a moment with him.
And yeah, that's always also great to hear because with the current climate for game development, you hear a lot of people are going through crunch and how crunch can inadvertently affect their family. And hearing about the alternative about how spend time with your family or how that can be beneficial and everything, that's always it's always good to hear about the other side of that coin. And I think and hope really that the future of it, the crunch kind of gets better for everyone in general. And that family time is something that's more talked about and more um enjoyed, or not, I don't have the right words for it, but it's something that's more talked about and not focus more on the positives or try to create a more positive environment instead of a negative environment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's very important to have that balance. I know my crankiest times are usually when I'm working way too much, so that's why I'm trying to take more time off these days.
Hmm. So, with that in mind, I don't want to keep you for too much longer on your day off. So I'm just gonna, ask you one more question. You can go with it wherever you will. So, what else is going on right now? You mentioned Streets of Rogue 2 for you. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about? A game you'd like to recommend, or just anything you'd really like to discuss or talk about for Streets of Rogue 2, or whatever. I'm giving you a platform, a soapbox, what have you, and inviting you to jump on up.
Well, yeah, I guess I could talk a little bit about the the intended the sequel, or really that's what I'm doing right now with it. Is I'm trying to make it into sort of a more open world kind of game, but
Mm.
keep a lot of the streamlined simplicity of the way you're like the original game. Not that Streets of Rogue is a quote unquote simple game, but it's simple to get into, and I
Mhm.
kind of keep a lot of that, and also keep the emergent gameplay elements while like sort of expanding the world and just the scope of it. Um, and hopefully I'm hoping that it's the kind of thing I can work on for a really long time and just keep like chipping away at it, adding new elements to it. Um, I have a lot of ideas right now, and a lot of people would probably warn me about feature creep because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I want to add like want to day night cycles, want to add fishing, I want to add like hunting, driving. Like I just recently added cars to the game. I still have to add like a highway system. It's like I want to add all these things, and um, yeah, I mean it's just kind of tricky to figure out what to work on first. And
Mhm.
the thing is, though, like I'm kind of going for broke on this one. Like the original game was, because I'm building this game on the back of the original. It's a lot of the issues that cropped up. I've been fixing bugs for years and years on this thing, so a lot of the issues that cropped up with the original game have been like sorted out. And what I'm hoping is that after I uh, finish a lot of the initial tech work, and turning this thing into an open world thing, which requires a lot of changes to the way the engine works, that it'll be somewhat easier for me to flesh out a world, than it would have been if I was just starting from scratch. Um, because like yeah, like as of right now, I mean like where I'm at, like I can. A lot of this world is going to be like. Have you ever heard of Daggerfall before?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like it was the second Elder Scrolls game. It was like this giant world, and it was procedurally generated a good chunk of it, and that's sort of the direction that I'm probably going to be going with this.
Mhm.
And so like right now, a lot of the groundwork has been done with the original game. Like, I'm not going to be changing the way the AI system works that much, or um, a lot of the other systems. I can make tweaks to them, and you know, gameplay and balance changes. But the on the technical side, a lot of this stuff is sorted out. So yeah, I'm just excited at the prospects of what I can do with a giant open world Streets of Rogue. And next year should be pretty fun. I'm hoping. So that's what I'm working on. Oh, and recommendations. Oh yeah, check out Watch Dogs Legion. It's like 3D open world Streets of Rogue. Actually, I mean, it's not quite what I wanted to do with my sequel, but if you want to see what Streets of Rogue might be like, sort of in 3D, that's your answer right there, I guess.
That's a very apt comparison. Um, I never really thought of, it just clicked now. I never really thought of Legion as kind of being more along the lines of a roguelike, but kind of is, because you have one character. If the character dies, you go to a new one. But at the same time, like you're saying, the elements that you're looking to introduce for your second game, which by the way sounds hilariously fantastic, just like the sheer um amount of crazy things that could happen, um just has me excited, like has me already on board to sit tightly and wait for it. But yeah, that's a strange, or an aptly, not aptly, it's a good and interesting comparison that, hopefully, and I say this in the best way possible, hopefully, after your game comes out, maybe even critics make the similar kind of comparison, because that I personally would think of that an enormous compliment. So, hopefully your comparison is something that other people, happily agree with and jump on.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so if that seems like a great game, Legion, it does, but it seems like you have a great roadmap in the future for Streets of Rogue 2, or whatever subtitle it may get. Um, so that art, like I said, that already has me on board. I'm gonna keep my eye out for that and follow that along, because
It's gonna be yeah. I have some different options I'm considering. Probably won't be Streets of Rogue 2 though. We'll see.
but yeah, like regardless of what that is, yeah, and I hope many others are on board with that, because it sounds like it'll be a fantastic next step, and a fantastic set of cool gameplay. But like I said, I don't want to keep you for too long. Let you get back to your day off. Thank you so much for joining me. And thanks again for joining me on the Red Tunic podcast. And special thanks to Matt for making some time to have this conversation with me, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of his music from the title track, Roads Deep.